Hi, sixth grade. Here we go. Last lesson for Perek Yebet. Time to finish up the story. Makat Bechorot has already happened, and Paro has finally told Bnei Yisrael, time to get out. So, what you prepared today was Psukim Lamed Daled through Mem Aleph. I know it was a lot, where Bnei Yisrael are preparing to leave Egypt. Let's take a look at it together. Here we go. Pasuk Lamed Daled. I'm going to move myself down there so you can see the pictures. Vayisa ha'am et bitseko. The nation lifted up their batsek. Batsek is their dough. So this is batsek shelo, its dough, their dough. Terem yachmatz, before it had leavened, which means before the yeast had time to interact with the other ingredients, which then causes it to rise. Misha arotam, tzrurot besimlotam. And their leftovers were tied up, wrapped up in their clothes, al shichmam, on their shoulders. Now you might want to ask, what leftovers are we talking about? It's not the leftovers of the meat of the Korban Pesach, because remember we said anything left over from that had to be burned. So this was leftovers of any of the other food they had, any of the maror, any of the matzah, and then this fresh dough. Lamed Hey, Ubnei Yisrael asu kidvar Moshe. Bnei Yisrael did what Moshe had told them to, like the word of Moshe. What was that? Vayishalu mi Mitzrayim, and they asked from Egypt, from the Egyptians, klei chasef uchlei zahav usmalot, which means silver items, gold items, and clothing. Like simla is a dress, so here it didn't just mean dress, it means all clothing. Lamed Vav, v'Hashem natan et chen ha'am be'eni Mitzrayim. Hashem placed the favor of the nation in the eyes of Egypt, meaning he made Egypt look upon them favorably, like they liked them. Vayash'ilum vayinatzlu et Mitzrayim. And Bnei Yisrael, Sha'al, requested from them, from Egypt, vayinatzlu et Mitzrayim, and they emptied out Egypt. Pasuk Lamed Zayin. We saw this one actually in our Aleph Beta lesson on the holiday of Sukkot, way back in like September or October. So I told you it would come up again. Vayisu b'nei Yisrael mi Ramses Sukkota. B'nei Yisrael traveled from Ramses, a city in Egypt. Sukkota is broken down into El Sukkot. Remember, hey, if there's like name of a city and then a hey at the end, get rid of the hey and put El in front. So El Sukkot. They went to the city of Sukkot. Kishesh me'ot elef ragli. They were 6 me'ot, 600,000 people on foot, hagvarim levad. And that's just counting the men alone. Gever is a man. Mitaf, right? Gvarim levad mitaf. The men alone from the children. That's not even counting the children. Okay? So it was a lot more than 600,000 people. But if we're just counting the grown men, it's 600,000. Lamed Chet. Who else came with Bnei Yisrael? Vigam Erev Rav Allah Itam. And an Erev Rav, I'm not translating this yet because we're going to do a Rashi, went with them. Who else? Vitzonu Bakar. And sheep and cattle. Mikne Kaved Ma'od. A lot of livestock. Livestock is a general word for sheep and cattle. Lamed Tet. Vayofu et habatzek asher hotziu mi Mitzrayim. And when they were in Sukkot, they traveled to this place, Sukkot. Remember we said that was the first night outside of Egypt. They baked this dough that they brought with them from Egypt, ugot matzot, into sort of like cakes, matzah cakes, kilo chametz. And they were called matzot because they had not risen. They had not become leavened or puffy. Why? Ki gorshu mi Mitzrayim, because they were banished, kicked out, sent out from Egypt. V'lo yachlu lehit mahameya, and they could not delay V'gam tzeidah lo asu lahem. And also, food for the way was not prepared for them, meaning all they had with them were some leftovers from the Korban Pesach meal, not the meat, the night before, and this fresh dough that they made. That's it. So you remember we talked about how that first night was really, really scary, and they showed a lot of emunah and Hashem, and that's why we celebrate Sukkot. Just reminding you of way back when. Now we're seeing it here in the Pesukim. Pasuk Mem. Umoshav b'nei Yisrael. And the time that b'nei Yisrael lived, the number of years, Asher yashvu b'mitzrayim, lived in Egypt. Yashvu here doesn't mean sat, but dwelled, lived, was shloshim shana ve'arba me'ot shana. 30 years and 400 years. So a total of 430 years. You should be having questions right about now. Pasuk Mem Aleph. Vayihi miketz shloshim shana va'arba me'ot shana. And at the end of this 430 years, Vayihi, it was, be'etzem hayom hazeh, in the middle of the day, yatzu kol tzivot Hashem me'eretz Mitzrayim. All the tzivot means the multitudes, like a lot of people. All the multitudes of Hashem left the land of Egypt. And the rest of Perek Yebet is talking more about the mitzvah for the rest of all time to keep Pesach. We're gonna skip over that. But this is actually the end of the narrative, the plot of being in Egypt. Israel have now left Egypt, and they are on their way to Har Sinai to get the Torah. They've done it. Now, before we move on to Perek Yud Gimel, we need to take a look at two Rashis for today. But before we get to those two Rashis, I would like you to please answer the questions in your Choveret on page 27 and 28. Just a little bit of pshat about these psukim that we just read and translated. So please take a moment now to do that. You're going to pause the video, and then you will come back and check your answers. Here we go. Question 1 Aleph. Kama anashim yatzu mitzrayim? How many men left Egypt? And the answer is 600,000. That's 5 zeros. Bet. Mi lo nichlal b'mispar hazeh. Who is not included in this number? The children. What about the women? Farshim aren't talking about it. We're not going to get into that right now. Question 2. Ma bikshu b'nei Yisrael me'hamitzrim lifnei shehem azvu. What did Bnei Yisrael request from the Egyptians before they left? And there were 3 things: silver, gold, and clothes. 3. Ma'asu Bnei Yisrael im habatseik shalahem. What did Bnei Yisrael do with their dough? They baked it unleavened into matzah. Or, alternatively, if you were going earlier in the story, they put it on their backs, tied up in their clothing. And then later on, when they got to Sukkot, they baked it into matzah. 4. Mi Allah im b'nei Yisrael mi Mitzrayim. There were 2 things, or 2 groups of beings. The first was Erev Rav, which I'm not translating yet because we'll get to a Rashi on that. And the second was cattle, livestock, sheep, all that stuff, all those animals. 5. Kama shanim yashvu b'nei Yisrael b'Mitzrayim. How many years did b'nei Yisrael dwell in Egypt according to the pasuk? 430 years. Here we go. On page 28 in your Choveret, Rashi number 1, what is this Erev Rav? Rashi's question is very simple here. What is the Erev Rav? This phrase is never seen before. This is the very first time this phrase Erev Rav is used. And any other time this phrase is used in the Torah, it's referring to the same exact element, the same one that left with Bnei Yisrael. So who are these people? So if you look at the word Erev, you actually see it has the same exact letters as one of the Makot. Arov. What did we say Arov meant? You saw Rashi there. It said Irbuvia. What's an Irbuvia? A mixture, right? With Arov, it was a mixture of different wild animals. It wasn't just one type. So here, Erev Rav has a similar concept. What does it mean? Rashi tells us, Ta'arovet umot, a mixture of nations. There were people from all different nations left with Bnei Yisrael. Why? Because they were Shel Gerim. They had all converted. And so they decided to come with Bnei Yisrael when it was time to leave Egypt. So not just Jewish people born into Bnei Yisrael had left, but people who decided to convert to Judaism also left. Take a moment and answer these two questions on Rashi right below. The first one is, what's Rashi's question? And the second one is, in your opinion, why did these people convert at this time? Pause. And now that you've unpaused, let's go over them. Rashi's question is, who is this Erev Rav? We've never seen this term before. And in your opinion, so I didn't write one down because this was a Ladatcha, but in my opinion, and I have a feeling many of you came up with the same answer because you're all very, very bright, that, seeing all of the Makot made them really believe in Hashem and have a lot of emunah. So that's probably why they decided to become believers in Hashem as well, rather than believers in whatever Avodah Zarah they believed in before. Now, the next Rashi we're going to do is on this 430 years. This should be something that's puzzling you because we know that Bnei Israel could not have possibly been in Egypt for 400 years. Why not? Well, there's another number that's less than 400 that we associate with Egypt. What number is that? 400. When we talk about the Brit Bein HaBetarim, when Hashem tells Abraham, your children will be strangers in a strange land, Arba Me'ot Shana, for 400 years, how can the Torah possibly say that they were in Egypt for 430 years? Rashi catches on to this. Because in one part in the Torah, it says they'll be strangers in a strange land for 400 years. And then as they're leaving, the Torah tells us it was 430 years. Like, what? Did Hashem lie? Did Hashem just extend the time? Is the Torah making a mistake? What's going on? How can the Torah be saying it was 430 years? So Rashi has to do a little bit of math to explain all this. We're going to go through the Rashi. If you don't get it, don't worry. I will show it to you on a timeline as well, which I highly suggest you write down somewhere in your notes. So take a look with me on page 29. Rashi tells us, Bein HaKol, all in all together, when we're looking at all of the history, Mishen Nolad Yitzchak ad achshav, from the time Yitzchak was born until now, this moment, Yetziat Mitzrayim. How long was it? Next line of Rashi, Hayu Arba Me'ot. That was 400 years, just like Hashem had promised in Brit Bein HaBetarim. So now you might question, but how can we start counting the 400 years from the birth of Yitzchak? Yitzchak never wasn't in Egypt. Yitzchak never left Eretz Yisrael, Eretz Canaan, right? How can we start saying that they are strangers in a strange land when Yitzchak never went to Egypt? So maybe the phrase strangers in a strange land doesn't mean only Egypt. Maybe it can mean that Avram's children are going to be strangers in a land that doesn't belong to them. And Egypt is not the only land that doesn't belong to them. Right? Watch this. This is brilliant. Mishahayalo zera la Avraham, because Yitzchak was Avram's child, and the promise says, your zera, your children will be strangers. Nitkayem ki ger yihi yazar acha. The promise of your children will be strangers was actually fulfilled. Why? If you think about it, Eretz Canaan back then was not yet belonging to Avraham either. So when Yitzchak, the zera of Avraham, was born, he was born as a stranger in a strange land. Yitzchak Eretz Canaan didn't belong to him yet. So from the very moment Yitzchak was born, that's when the ticking clock of Brit Bein HaBetarim started, because Avraham Zera was indeed a stranger in a strange land, Yitzchak being born in Eretz Canaan. And 400 years after that is Yetziat Mitzrayim. So now we've solved the problem of 400 years, right? The 400 years that Hashem promised they'd be strangers in a strange land is not counted from when the Jewish people go to Egypt, but it's actually counted from the birth of Yitzchak. And that gets you to 400 years appropriately. But then what about the 30 years extra? The Torah here in Parakid Bet says 430 years. Where are we getting this extra 30 years from? So Rashi continues, Ushloshim shana hayu, and it had been 30 additional years, mishenigzera gzerat bein habtarim, from the moment that Hashem promised Brit Bein HaBetarim, ad shenola Yitzchak, until Yitzchak's birth. So you have Hashem promising Avram, your children are going to be strangers in a strange land. 30 years later, Yitzchak is born. Boom, the ticking clock of the 400 years begins. 400 years later, Yetziat Mitzrayim. Okay? And that's why we have the Torah saying it's 430 years that they were in Egypt. It's not that they were in Egypt literally for 430 years. It's that since the moment of Brit Bein Habitarim, when this concept of Bnei Yisrael being strangers in a strange land starts, the promise started, and that's when we can start counting the 430 years from. Let's finish up the Rashi, because now that Rashi has created this timeline, with all the other information we know how old Yitzchak was when Yaakov was born, we know how old Yaakov was when he went down to Egypt, we can then do a whole bunch of calculations and figure out something else. I'm not going to go through all the details of the calculation, but Rashi sums it up for us at the end. And when we count Arba Meot Shana Mishenolad Yitzchak, the 400 years from the birth of Yitzchak, Timtza Meviatanli Mitzrayim, we find that from the moment they entered Egypt with Yaakov, when Yaakov comes down with all of his family, Ad Yitziatan, until the moment they left, how many years is it? Based on the ages and stuff like that, Ma'atayim ve'asara, 210 years. So from the very moment that Yaakov and his family come to Egypt until Yitziat Mitzrayim was 210 years out of those 400 that Hashem promised. Now, were they slaves from the very moment Yaakov entered? No, of course not. So the slavery was even less than 210 years, because the slavery didn't start until that generation had died. Must have started, 30, 40 years after, maybe 20. But the actual number of years that there was a Jewish presence in Egypt was only 210 years. 210 out of the 400 that Hashem had promised. So please answer the questions, the Rashi questions on page 29 and 30. I will read and translate those for you right now. Then we'll come back and review. And then after that, I have a special bonus mini lesson for you guys. Just a really fun, cool thing. So question 1, Al-Ezer She'ela on Rashi. What's Rashi's question here on this Arba Me'ot Shloshim Shana v'Arba Me'ot Shana? 2, Al Pi Divrei Hashem bebrit bein habitarim lekama shanim yu b'nei Avraham gerim. According to Hashem's promise in Brit bein habitarim, how many years would Avram's children be strangers? 3, Kama zman avar mizman Brit bein habitarim l'leidat Yitzchak. How much time was in between the Brit bein habitarim and the birth of Yitzchak? 4, Madua nechshavu b'nei Avraham kigerim lifnei hayirida l'Mitzrayim. Why are Avraham's children considered to be like strangers before they've even gone to Egypt, while they're still living in Eretz Canaan? And 5, Kama shanim hayu b'nei Avraham b'Mitzrayim. How many years were descendants of Avraham actually living in Egypt? All right, before we answer these questions, I am going to show you this timeline I promised. So you have room on the bottom of page 30 to write this timeline if you would like. Here it is. And I will also post a picture of this on the Google Classroom if you would like. So here we have a timeline, okay? Timeline. At the very end of the timeline, we have Yitziat Mitzrayim, okay? At the very beginning of the timeline, I am putting, well, actually not at the very beginning, somewhere near the beginning, I'm going to put Leidat Yitzchak, the birth of Yitzchak, because we know that the distance, the number of years between those two events was how long? 400 years. Just like Hashem had promised in Brit Bein Habitarim. So I know for a fact 400 years between these two events. And how many years before Yitzchak was born did Hashem promise to Avraham the Brit Bein Habitarim? That happened 30 years earlier. And so on my timeline, we add before the birth of Yitzchak, we add Brit Bein Habitarim happened 30 years earlier. And so in total, this is how the pasuk can say 430 years. That they weren't literally in Egypt for 430 years, but this entire story started and ended after 430 years. Now, based on the age of Yitzchak and the age of Yaakov and all that stuff, what else do we know? We know that Yaakov, when he went to Mitzrayim, happens obviously after the birth of Yitzchak, right? Because Yitzchak then gives birth to Yaakov somewhere over here, and then Yaakov goes down to Egypt. And based on all of that math, we know that there were 210 years that Yaakov and his children were in Egypt and his descendants. So let's answer these questions. What's Rashi's question? 430 years. Where does this number come from? Right? Well, I thought it was supposed to be 400. How is it possible? So 2. According to Hashem, how many years would Avram's children be strangers? 400 years. How much time passed between Brit Bein B'Tarim and the birth of Yitzchak? 30 years. Why are Avram's children considered to be strangers before they even go down to Egypt? Because at the time they were living in Eretz Canaan, which did not yet belong to them, so they were strangers. How long were they actually in Egypt? 210 years. All right, now the official lesson ends, so please complete the check for understanding on Google Classroom. Thank you very much. And you have an open notes test on Monday. Tomorrow at our Erev Shabbat, pump up Zoom session, we can talk more about this open notes test, quiz, assessment, whatever. It's not going to be hard if you have questions. And I would definitely just review your notes over the weekend. Bonus lesson. This is one of my favorite Divrei Torah of all time. My father told it to me, and I've heard it many, many times. And I think it's just so cool because it takes Rashi, and it just takes Pshat, and it takes Trup, which is the tune we use to say the Torah, and it just pulls it all together, and it's just, so beautiful. So watch what happens here. This lesson, this idea comes from the Vilna Gaon, also known as the Gra, Gaon Rav Eliyahu. Okay, he lived from 1720 to 1797 in Lithuania, which is in Europe. So he lived around the same time. He overlapped with the Revolutionary War and when America became a country and all that stuff. But he did not live there, so I don't even know if he was aware of it. But just interesting. It was a contemporary. Now, way back in Perek Aleph, Pasuk Yudalid, what are we told? That the Egyptians, Vayimaru et Chayehem, they made Bnei Yisrael's lives bitter. Not only did they give them hard work, but they made their lives bitter. Now, when we look at Tamei HaMikra, or Trup, the little signs above and below, mostly above the words in the Torah, we don't really know what those mean unless you're preparing Talain to read from the Torah, but it's the tune. Now, we know a couple of them because they serve as stoppers, right? We've looked at those in terms of their grammatical form and function, but they also can teach us other stuff. So if you take a look over the words Vayimaru et Chayehem, we have these two notes. Okay, the way it's laned is Vayimaru et Chayehem. You've heard that before. What are these two notes called? These trup. The one on top of Vayimaru is called Kadma, which sounds for the word Kodem. It means early. It's Aramaic for early. And above the word Chayehem, you have the note called Azla. Azal is Aramaic for leave. Okay? So the tune that we sing above the words Vayimaru et Chayehem is a Kadma v'Azla. Now, it gets even better, right? So because the Egyptians were Vayimaru et Chayehem, made the Jews' lives bitter, the Jews were able to get up and leave early, right? They weren't actually in Egypt in slavery for 400 years. It was earlier than that. It was less time than that. They got up and left before 400 years were over in Egypt. They only had 210 years of time in Egypt, and even less if you think about how harsh the slavery was. It gets better. What's the gematria of Kadma v'Azla? Kadma comes out to 145. V'Azla comes out to 45. 145 plus 45 is 190. What is 400 minus 190? 210. Jewish people, the Gra tells us, the Jewish people left 190 years early because of Vayimaru es Chayehem. This is a beautiful, beautiful idea that the Gra teaches us, that the trup, the signs and the names of the signs that tell us the notes of how to read the Torah aren't just, music. It's not just music. It's not just to sound nice. There's actually hints to beautiful meanings in the Torah of what Rashi taught us here, that they left, that they were only in Egypt for 210 years, not for a full 400. It's all hinted to. It's all interconnected. This was way back in Perek Aleph. So I just thought this was beautiful and cool. Every time I learn that pasuk in Aleph, Vayimaru Chayehem, I always think of this gra, but I had to stop myself from teaching it to you way back then because I knew we were going to do this Rashi here that also went through the math of it. So I hope you enjoyed this little extra bonus. I know the video was long today, but it was our last lesson for Perek Yud Bet, and there will be no Chumash tomorrow. Please make sure you're doing the check for understanding, taking good notes, and we will hopefully have a fairly understandable, simple, and straightforward assessment on this on Monday. Have a great day.